Hello, welcome to another session about the data governance integration in One Identity Manager. As you probably know, Matthew Muse leads us through this session. Unfortunately, he's on the way back home and I try to reach him using my mental bridge in the airplane. Matt, what we will see in this session?
In this video, we are going to be talking about data governance PowerShell commands. And data governance provides this whole set of PowerShell commands around most of its functionality. So we're going to be showing just a few examples, 3 samples of what you can use, what you can do with PowerShell, and then as well as providing more information on where you can get additional help.
Brilliant, Matt. That sounds wonderful. So let's show the people something.
Data governance provides obviously a lot of functionality through the manager, through the web portal, but there's also a lot of functionality DGE provides via PowerShell. So most of the functionality that you've been seeing throughout the manager in terms of adding managed hosts, configuring agents, governing resources, all of the access reporting, etc., all of that functionality is also available via PowerShell. So the DGE service is wrapped around this PowerShell layer. So here on this client machine, I'm going to open up PowerShell and I'm going to add the data governance snap-in. So the way you do that is add-ps snap-in request.data governance. There you go. So now all the data governance PowerShell commands are loaded. Now, if you don't have the PowerShell snap-in, the client assemblies you need, there's actually a directory that contains them, and you would have to import modules. So basically import-module and the path to your data governance snap-in, the PowerShell, and that is right here. That's the assembly right there, quest.titan.client.powershell.dll. On this machine, I already have that, so I'm going to go ahead and start typing some data governance commands. One thing that may be required with PowerShell, so if you want to actually use the DGE PowerShell commands, so I'm going to click on PowerShell here, and you need to set your service connection. So basically what that means is through PowerShell, I need to specify where my DGE service is located. Basically, it's a one-time thing on any particular deployment here in any particular PowerShell instance that you're interested in. So it's not that complicated. I'm going to show you guys how to do it. So ps snap-in. I'm in a German keyboard, of course. Request.data governance, right? Adds the snap-in. And then we have this command set-q service connection, right? Takes 3 parameters. Let me move my mouse away so you guys can see. Deployment. So you can have multiple deployments of DGE within the forest indicated by a text string, an identifier. In this case, my deployment is DGE 702, right? And then the next command is the actual server name. So here, my server name where the DGE service is deployed is mmdim 702.madico.local. No problem there. And then finally, the port that you set the service to run as, right? So for me, it's 8722. So set-q service connection with your deployment name, your server name, and the port. No problem at all. And then I can call things like get-q managed hosts. And that will target this command against the service that you indicated in that previous command. There you go. And it's not something you have to do every time you open up PowerShell, but you may have to do it at least that one time in order to make sure that your current instance of PowerShell on this particular installation is pointing to the correct DGE server. So most of the commands are in the format like get or set. So we have get-q managed hosts. A lot of times you'll need a managed host ID. All managed hosts are identified by a GUID. So get managed hosts will show you all of the managed hosts. You can output that to a file if you want. In my particular case, I have 2 managed hosts. I have a local Windows managed host here and I have a remote managed host, which is my NetApp filer, right? So the output from PowerShell command is showing me that I have 2 managed hosts, and it'll give some information about those managed hosts. And one thing to keep in mind is that the ability to run DGE PowerShell commands is limited by being able to run them. You need to have those data governance roles, right? So here, the reason I'm able to get managed hosts is because I am running as an account associated with a one identity manager employee who has those data governance roles. So without that, you wouldn't be able to get any of this information. Luckily I am, so I can see getting managed hosts here. So what I'm interested in is here, the second line is the managed host ID. This GUID here, for I would say probably 90% of the time when you're running PowerShell and DGE, that is the ID you're going to need for every host, for every access report, whatever. The managed host ID is key, right? So what I've done is I actually have that here. I've copied that out. So I have my managed host ID right here. That's it. So I'm going to go back to the bottom. So the 3 examples that I'm going to give with PowerShell are the first 2 are basically access-based reporting from a resource perspective, right? So all of the access reports, account access reports, resource access reports, everything is available here. So what I'm going to do is a resource access report. Now the resource access report, it's broken up into 2 PowerShell commands. So one of them is get-q resource access. That returns a variable. You assign the results of that to a variable. And then the second command allows you to export the results to a file somewhere on your directory. So I'm going to do both of those things. So I've made it a little faster here. Get-q resource access basically takes 3 things. It needs the managed host ID, which I've typed right there, the resource type, which is of type folder, right? So that resource here that I'm just about to, in the third parameter, it's a folder path. So you specify whether or not it's a folder path or a share path. And here, the actual resource that I'm going to be running the get-q resource access PowerShell command against is this folder, which is the sister stuff folder. This is the folder we've been using in our examples. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to execute this. There, nothing happened, right? No, that's not true. We assigned the results of that PowerShell command to that variable access. So with that variable, I could start doing some things. I could actually start looking at the data structures there. But what I'm going to do is actually output it directly to my temp directory. So that's where this second one comes in here, this export, right? So export-q resource access takes as one of its parameters the resource access results from the previous PowerShell command. And then you specify the output path, which is basically what is the file where you want these output results to go to. Right? So that's a pretty quick one. So basically, I output the results of this to a CSV file. Here it is, out.csv. One of the parameters was optimized for Excel, and I actually have this already pre-exported, and I'm going to show you. Here I have Excel. So here's the results from the resource access PowerShell command export, and you can see that basically it's going to show you the accounts that have access. If there's any deviated children resource, here you can see there's this folder which is hide from our brother Matthew, and it'll display the security on the subfolders and sub-resources that have deviated security as well, including the rights that they have, their SIDs, etc., etc. So now you have this exported CSV file which you can manipulate however you want. So that's the first example. That's get resource access via the DGE PowerShell commands. The second example that I want to show you is activity from a resource perspective. So again, the DGE server has a database that it stores all the activities from the agents, assuming that the managed hosts are configured for resource activity. So the way you can access that data is a few ways. You can run resource activity reports, you can calculate perceived owner, which uses the activity, or you can get it directly via PowerShell. Fresh. Get-q resource activity, again, or the first parameter is the managed host ID, which we've already discussed. That's the managed host ID for my local Windows server. a list of resources. Here, I'm going to run the resource activity PowerShell command against the sister stuff folder, and then I'm going to pipe it out to a text file. So I'm just going to go ahead and go enter. There you go. So it's going to output data sets for all of the different resource activities that it's found on that resource. And you can scroll through. I'll try and do it a little slowly, but you can see not only is it showing activities on the resource I specified, but also it's showing you activities on sub resources, right? So here you see that subfolder, hide from our brother Matthew, right there. And it's actually showing you all of the activities underneath. And the reason is, if you can think about perceived owner, when you want to calculate perceived owner on a specific resource, it's important not just to look at the activity on the parent folder, but also on the sub resources as well. So obviously for getting activity, we want to also return the sub activities as well. So here you can see it actually will show you the account. Here's my sister, Pam Green. She's been accessing the resource as well as her SID. The start time and the end time. Again, with resource activity, there are time spans. It's the aggregation of activities, the operation, the path, etc., etc. So it's a full set of all of the activities in text file. And then again, once you have that data, you can do whatever you want. This is very useful in terms of troubleshooting resource activity. So if you're not sure if resource activity is actually flowing from the agents to the DG activity database, technically you could go to SQL Server Management Studio, take a look and select top 1,000 rows or whatever from some of those tables to see if there's anything in there. But a better way to do it is to use PowerShell, because PowerShell allows you to get this textual output that's very human readable. And I think that's a great troubleshooting thing for resource activity.